Hello there, gamerinos and gamerinas. Welcome to UnicornStorm. This is Rady, and today I'm sharing my earliest impressions of The Outer Worlds 2. It's alright. Worth 80 bucks? Hell no. It's more Outer Worlds, and if you really like that game, then you might enjoy this one. But if you hoped for some improvements on some of the first game's issues, well, you won't find a lot of them in this game. It more so feels like the developers doubled down on the things that got criticized the first time around. And I mean, I enjoyed the first game. When the first Outer Worlds released, I was still lamenting the way Fallout was going, becoming more of an open world shooter and less of a storytelling RPG with each iteration. So Outer Worlds kinda filled a hole there. It wasn't perfect, especially with the flanderized Whedon writing, and the approach to quest design, where there's always a win-win outcome if you just fidget around long enough. But it still put the focus back on the roleplay, even if it wasn't flawlessly executed. We had skills for combat, for exploration, and even for use in dialogue. We once again were able to convince characters with our vast knowledge of, for example, explosives. Pretty much all quests allowed for multiple different approaches and often offered at least 2 different outcomes. The game world was smaller, the content more overseeable, and it didn't offer the Bethesda amount of pointless interactivity. This was more intimate, and everything appeared more purposeful, with a lot of room to improve in a possible sequel. Which we got here, with all the issues and more. The writing is even more cynical and ham-fistedly satirical. It seems the main focus was it being tongue-in-cheek at every turn, not believability. It's more important to never get a minute without a joke than to convey deep thoughts or show some emotion. It starts in the main menu that is presented as a stupid dialogue with a corporate mascot. Just let me select new game, don't waste my time with your bullshit. Now, the game can get serious and there are some more normal characters, but these get drowned out between all the funny goofy scenes and also the stuff they say, the problems they have. It's really not all that interesting, mostly because the whole setting is so unbelievable that nothing really seems to matter. Like, the whole story doubles and triples down on the corporate satire to a point where the world building can't even function anymore. The colony is liberated, all that counts is free enterprise, and for some reason that means everyone can just do whatever they want. At times the game pretends that there just are no rules under capitalism. But why then is there a military? How can there be a governing body? Oh, because of company contracts. So how did they liberate the colony? Why are they waging war against the ones not wanting to join the company? Aren't they free to follow their own creed? The other major faction is an authoritarian regime, a police state of sorts, where everyone is encouraged to snitch on their neighbors, are rated by a social credit system and carried off to reprogramming if their social status sinks too low. And then there's us, an Earth agent with no allegiance to either corporations or extragalactic governments. But since everything has to be tongue-in-cheek, and everything has to be subjective, so our faction also has to be a caricature. So we're a bit fascist. At least one of our crewmates is made out to be. And our only 2 options when talking to him are either choosing the dark side and agreeing to force some law and order onto the colonies, or lay into him hard, like unreasonably hard. That guy's our trusted companion who's implied to have had our back on countless missions, but here we are tearing him a new asshole. There is zero subtlety in this game, yet it expects me to roleplay. Why would I? My dialogue options come down to agree, disagree, extort more money and ask for more info, just in more fancy words. Often the game lets me choose between 4 or so responses, but they all lead to the same result in the conversation. The game has the same problem as Avowed earlier this year, in that the dialogue trees aren't actually trees. More like poles with a bit of shrubbery sticking out here and there. Conversations have set sequences of topics and responses. Your choices don't affect the flow of the conversation. All they do is maybe give you a throwaway flavor line before you're immediately sent back onto the railroad. At most, the last response in a conversation matters, but often not even that one. Though there are quite a few instances where you can choose between different approaches to a quest or mission, so the conversations this time around can have some impact. at times. I really despised Avowed for how shallow its conversations were, but at least that game had a more engaging combat system. Here we get the same light run and gun gameplay as in the first game, and Fallout before it, and Starfield. So yeah, the game doesn't really break any new ground when it comes to combat or exploration, but it is a bit better in the RPGing department than Avowed, so I can tolerate it more. And every now and then you stumble upon a scene with a really competently written dialogue tree. So there were some talented people in the writing staff. So in this example, there is this scene where you find some fugitives hidden in a basement. I found this secret entrance, and when I went down, the conversation started automatically. They stole some food and were hiding out down here, and they wouldn't go down without a fight. So at one point I used a response tied to my observation skill, exclaiming that they must surely be starving, though that only riled them up further and initiated combat. After I disposed of them, a soldier guy appeared, talked about how he investigated weird occurrences which led him here, and now he was disappointed since it wasn't a supernatural sign from a dead lover. So all in all, nothing special. But this was when I was collecting footage of, well, the lack of any depth in the conversations. So I reloaded the scene and tried a different approach. And unsurprisingly, the sequence played out mostly the same, with one or two alternate filler lines. But there were a few options I couldn't select, so I thought it might be worthwhile doing some investigating, maybe activate this quest through the soldier and not the fugitives. So I found another piss-easy route into the basement. I talked to the soldier, though he didn't give me all that much insight, so I went to the place where they stole the food. You can't find out anything about them there either, but outside you can find an apple lying on the ground. And another one a few meters away. And another one, leading up to the secret wall, without the game highlighting it, giving you a journal entry or anything. Not even the observation skill got triggered, though I guess that one should have happened, since it was something noticeable out of the ordinary. I like that it doesn't, but it kinda makes the whole skill horribly inconsistent. Well, at least it activates to show me bright red glowing mines. Where were we? Right, following apples. With nothing better to do, I once more entered the conversation with the fugitives, but this time I was more careful with the responses I chose. Now I need to clarify that I'm following a friend's advice to not skill speechcraft in these types of RPGs, as to not have an easy win option in any conversation. This immediately locks me out of some paths and some quests, but in a well-designed game, it leads to more thought through and deliberate conversations. And well, this scene was actually done pretty well. Nothing you really do here leads to an immediate positive resolution. You sometimes have to challenge them, sometimes appease them, sometimes show off your abilities. But all you accomplish is stalling them, delaying the fight as long as you can, until the soldier arrives. And now you are not only in better fighting condition, but have the numbers on your side as well. So now you can intimidate them into surrendering. And that was incredibly satisfying. Such a small quest, not even a real quest, but so well done. As I've said, this proves that at least one writer had actual skill or talent. More of that would have been nice. But for the most part, we are stuck with either the railroaded conversation or those that have no impact at all aside from which reward you get, if even.
This entire dialogue is pointless.
I accepted a mission to sabotage a combat robot factory, but instead helped repair it. It's nice that I'm able to do that, but there's no consequences to that. The officer who gave me that task even mentioned that it didn't really matter that I helped the enemy, that it didn't create any problems. And then immediately gives me the next assignment. For fuck's sake, she should have sicked all available soldiers after me for being a traitor, or at least chased me out of town for breaking contract or whatever. That's the conversations. But choices, empty or not, aren't exclusive to dialogue options. During exploration, we find a lot of interactions that require the use of a skill, or a certain character background, or trait. With the lucky trait, I was able to guess passwords and mix medicine for a quest on some occasions. Even negative traits can sometimes be used to go for an evil or negative outcome to a quest. Most of the time you have to pass skill checks though. These aren't random rolls, but always thresholds, so if your skill level is too low, you aren't even allowed to attempt whatever it is you want to do. More often than not, multiple different skills can be used for a single interaction, like using either explosives or engineering on a jammed door. Or two different interactions with differing skill requirements lead to the same outcome, like a hidden switch or a locked terminal opening the same passage. And very often there is a non-skill related solution if you look for it hard enough. Often there is a convenient air duct nearby or some rubble you can climb over, a key or password hidden not too far away, and stuff like that. In the robot factory you need to hack a door to get access to a terminal to stop the flow of poisonous gas. But before you do that, you need to close two valves at the upper level of the facility, but the elevator needs to be repaired with the engineering skill. Or you jump over a few boxes, cross a small gap and climb a ladder. You even find some loot that way. And you can skip the initial door by just crawling through a gas-filled air duct. On the one hand, it's nice that there's always multiple approaches to any challenge, but on the other, you never have to commit to any build and there are, again, no real consequences for lacking a certain skill. Only sometimes you're locked out of something optional, but even then, look around for a bit and you might find an alternative approach. But mostly it's just fixed interactions. A lot of them, a lot of different ones, but always just a button press on a terminal or door or other device. Avowed got a bit more creative here. While it never became too inventive, you had a lot of more natural interactions. Use a freeze spell to create ice flows to jump off from, or shoot down an obstacle, use fire to burn vines. And it was always accompanied with lots of platforming and many winding, sometimes hidden paths. The observant player found a lot of different ways to tackle any challenge, which also extended into combat, with a variety of enemy attack patterns and animations, with interesting combat arenas and so many different ways to engage, lead enemies into traps or more advantageous positions. Outer Worlds 2 is less so. It's mostly the same as the first game. There are some minor differences to how the systems work, like fewer skill points with each level up and a lack of sub-skills, and sadly no more companion skills, which kinda forces your character to be an all-rounder. But for what it's worth, it's more or less the same game. The game world is now larger, but this comes mostly just down to longer stretches of wilderness in between settlements and dungeons, with more trivial loot scattered around, more uninspired combat encounters in the middle of nowhere. The major areas are well designed both in the visual department as well as in the level design and scripted events and the like, but for little side dungeons or encounters out in the wilds, it's just groups of enemies lazily plopped into the game world, mindlessly throwing themselves towards you or staying still and shooting at you. There are a few exceptions, some enemies show some neat combat behavior sometimes, but mostly the combat hasn't much depth or tactics concerning movement and position. It's only about stats and damage types. Combat really isn't the focus, it's a necessity, and while exploring the world is a major component, the game more so expects you to walk through it and isn't about fancy acrobatics. Those are there, but not as prominent. This game will never become a platformer. It's here to tell you a story that you can influence and define a character with a set of statistics, and with all the faults this game has, that is its strong point. And all the shallow open world exploration and combat is here to fill the gaps between conversations and skill checks, and prevent conversation fatigue. And it works well enough, so I can't really fault the game for that. Avowed's combat was way more engaging and way more fun, traversal and exploration a lot deeper and demanding, but it completely failed as an RPG. Had it been a straight up action game, fully focusing on the fighting and dungeon crawling, it might have not sucked. Now I say there isn't much to the combat and movement in Outer Worlds 2, but that's of course not entirely true. Healing has a risk-reward system attached to it now, with your inhaler also increasing toxicity levels, leading to a drug crash if you heal too much too quickly, and when you crash you can't heal again until the drugs are completely out of your system. There are secret locations you have to platform your way up to, hidden crawly paths to bypass a challenge or get a better position, but the game never gets too crazy with this. You do find semi or maybe even fully optional movement methods throughout your journey. The double jump is locked behind a side quest and it lets you bridge wide gaps or gives you a height boost. And on the same note, you now have different gadgets. The first one returned from the first game. It's your time dilation, Outer Worlds' substitute for the VAT system. where you have more time to aim and can also target weak spots for additional damage. But you also get a shield gadget through a quest which prevents harm from environmental hazards, or a body disposal acid dispenser. So there are a lot of small ways to augment your playstyle, which is a very welcome approach, better than just giving you more and more passive bonuses, which of course can also alter the way you play and approach challenges. But little active gameplay mechanics you have to manage, or choose not to, are better in keeping the gameplay fresh. Another way to change your playstyle is the little character upgrades. You can find baseball, or I guess tossball cards, which give permanent bonuses to certain stats. Every few levels you can select a positive trait, if you meet the skill requirements that is, that might further raise some stats or give new abilities, though mostly options during interactions. And then there are the negative traits, which returned from the first game, though again a bit different from before. They pop up every now and then, whenever you behave in specific ways, but whereas in The Outer Worlds 1, you would gain 1 perk point for accepting a flaw, this time they come with both bonuses and drawbacks. Like, your bones are creaking so you can sneak faster, but enemies close to you will hear you regardless. Or all your weapons hold more ammunition, but you suffer a penalty whenever you empty a magazine. These traits offer less flexibility, but I feel they are more fun that way. You have to decide on the spot if a bonus is worth it, if the drawback clashes with your playstyle, or choose to adapt and change your playstyle. It theoretically makes for a more dynamic playthrough, and I'm all for it. The party members sadly don't impact the gameplay very much. Party members in these games have always been mostly just extra inventory space and meat shields, and now in this game you don't even have to worry about inventory space, but they also have a few more uses. Of course, there's character-specific companion dialogues in some conversations. Your companions can chime in during a conversation, even take the lead and solve a conflict for you. Of course, in highly scripted situations. They don't do your work for you. It's more like they are the key item or piece of information or skill you brought into the conversation to pass the skill check. But it does create some alternative resolutions and more insight into your crew members, which is nice. But since they don't have skills of their own anymore, you don't build your squad around the anticipated challenges and roadblocks, but just take those with you whose gun you like the most. Only you are able to hack, to lockpick, to repair. Now, the companions are creatively designed and you can unlock some really useful abilities for them, through leveling as well as with special collectibles, further customizing your playstyle, but we're talking about minor bonuses and combat utility, not the many more aspects and challenges of the game. Again, if you enjoyed the first game, then there's a lot to enjoy for you in here as well. Some of the small changes to the systems enhance the experience, like the companion perks, others don't or might even hurt it, like the lack of companion skills. There is now an option to play the game in third person with 2 camera options, either close or far, and I guess this is neat, but the game is clearly designed around the first person view. It's hard to target items and objects in the environment, your characters' animations are stiff and uninspired, so it's not a lot of fun watching them running through the wilderness. The third person camera for these kinds of games has never really evolved past Skyrim. It's really not worth it. Also, to change the view, even the camera distance, you always have to go into the settings menu, which is just tedious. Fallout 3 already had you smoothly control the camera distance, so this is even a step back. The worlds themselves are exotic and alien. It has the same somewhat cartoonish look to the environments as the first game, but I for one like the style. It's not too cartoonish as to completely clash with the realistic character designs, but it gives off that surreal feel, enhanced by the colorful creatures as well as the eccentric clothing styles and mannerisms of the NPCs, and of course the creative weapon designs. There's lots of detail in the environments and there's always a beautiful landmark in view or something going on in the skybox. The game wants the worlds to feel alive. Critters scuttle about, waves are crashing against the shore, starships are flying overhead, orbital shields are firing off. There's lots going on and it helps you immerse yourself in the game world. Now, if it were just better written, with more meaningful dialogue choices, consistently, not just on occasion, it might be worth getting, on sale. But as it is now, there are just better alternatives out there. Add to that a lack of polish with weird sound issues, like sounds played at awkward moments. also the player character's footsteps. Graphical glitches. The healing station completely ignoring that most of my body is prosthetics, or NPC dialogue not accounting for previous conversations. It really isn't worth a more than premium asking price. And if you just want it for the open world action gameplay, you'd be better off playing Avowed. And damn, that tells you something. But with that, I'm off. I wish you the greatest of days. This has been Rady, and I hope to see you again on the next game.
Commander, you're bleeding.
Not getting up without help, Commander!